Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 23 playthrough of the Colorado Rockies. We have just passed the 2053 trading deadline, and the Rockies did make 4 moves in July to hopefully allow this historic run the team is on to continue. Can see as August begins, our record is 81-33, a 711 winning percentage, on pace for 115 wins. So this team is on pace for one of the great seasons in mythical baseball history at this point. This is certainly a win-now team after being in the playoffs the past 3 seasons and winning the championship last year. The goal is certainly to get a repeat this season. And on that front, we made the 4 trades that I talked about. After all-time great pitcher and our number 1 starter, Rogelio Loera, suffered a injury that's going to keep him out for the rest of this year and probably result in us declining his option for next year and possibly ending his career. We made a big trade for Gus Duran, a pretty good left-handed pitcher. He's not great. You can see he's in our 4th starter spot in the rotation, but he's got extreme ground ball tendencies, ground baller pitcher type, really good movement on his pitches. Think that he can be very effective in Colorado. And it does give us 4 starters, or 5 starters that we really like. So it gives us a little more insurance that we'll have a 4-man rotation that we like for the playoffs, even if we do have some injuries over the last couple months of the season. Duran was pretty expensive to bring on board. We had to give up one of the top prospects in our system and one of the top prospects in baseball, starting pitcher Cameron Miller, to bring him on board. And you can see Cleveland put him right in the majors after he was in AAA with us this past year. He's 1-2 with a 6.06 ERA for them. I think he will ultimately be a pretty effective major league pitcher. You can see he's considered the number 18 prospect in baseball. But not having those ground ball tendencies and also not having the greatest work ethic in the world, still have a little bit of question whether he's going to reach all the potential that our scout and other scouts think he has, and felt that in terms of the goal of winning this year, Duran was better to have on board. And we also got Cleveland to retain half of his contract, so we're going to have him at about $14.2 million a year for each of the next 2 years after this while he's in his early 30s. So I think that that's a really good move for a win-now team. And the other move that we made was picking up reliever Sal Lofton, another guy who really fits the profile that we want in Coors, just gives us more depth out of the bullpen. He's a veteran who's in the final year of his contract. The Red Sox just wanted to move on from him for a prospect, so we were happy to do that and bring on a little more talent to our major league pitching staff, which is already excellent. And we also made a couple moves with our everyday players. Bring on shortstop Israel Mays to take over as our starting shortstop. Got a little bit of a bat, and he's well above average defensively. Not a gold glove type defensive shortstop, but certainly more than respectable. Gotten off to a good start with us hitting .288 thus far. And the reason we brought him on board was that Jordan Casares, who's been our starting shortstop, who is definitely a little bit better defensively and also a pretty solid hitter, hitting .303 this year, is fragile at this point. He's had multiple stints on the injured list the last couple of seasons, and we just did not have anyone close to as good as Casares to play shortstop for us in the event he got hurt. Ended up bringing on Mays, who is our starter now, but love to have Casares in kind of that utility infielder role, given that he has the ability to play pretty much any second base, third base, or shortstop type position at an extremely high level. Mays was somewhat similar to the first trade that I talked about, where we paid a high price to bring him on board. We had to get rid of two players off of our major league roster, quite honestly. Bobby Mata a young guy that we picked in the Rule 5 draft a few years ago who was hitting 364 in limited time with us in the majors when we traded him away. And over the course of his career in the majors is still a 300 hitter, even though he is not hitting nearly as well with Toronto as he hit with us over the course of his career. And then we also had to give up our starting second baseman, Rogelio Terrazas. Actually, he was a part-time starting second baseman for us. Felt that his glove was just not as good. His bat was solid. But most importantly, he was heading into free agency. And he was... we can't make an offer to him now because he's not on our team. But he was looking for around $17 million a year, I think, for around 7 years. And that was just not a contract that we were going to offer. Mays is still arbitration eligible for the next couple years. His number is going to get higher, but like the fact that he will be back with us. And then we also made a trade for Demetrius Washington, a 32, soon-to-be 33-year-old veteran, very highly paid player in the last year of his contract. Had to give up a lot to get Cleveland to retain his contract, but feel he is another excellent defensive player. Not an ideal shortstop, quite honestly, but would feel real good playing him at third base or second base. And certainly could play him at shortstop if we needed. He's fragile. He's in our starting lineup right now as our second baseman because starting second baseman Danny Ruiz is still suspended for another game. When Ruiz is finally healthy tomorrow, or not healthy tomorrow, but eligible to play tomorrow, I think that we will do some shifting. And I would think that Ruiz, Washington, Ortega, and Mays versus righties and lefties will all get in the starting rotation, in the starting lineup, at least a little bit. You know, it's possible some of those guys may only be playing against lefties, which means they're probably only going to be a starter like 30% of the time. But we'll shift the team around to hopefully give us the best offense and the best defense possible because we are chasing after a title, as I said. And despite the trade of Cameron Miller and some other good to middling prospects, have the 7th best farm system in baseball right now. We did not have to give up Elijah Smith, the player that we took 3rd overall 3 years ago at this point, and still have him in our system. And he is obviously looks like he's getting very close to major league ready. He wants to be in the majors. We just don't have a spot for him right now, but certainly he could be a potential September call-up for us. And then the only other thing that we're waiting to hear is you may remember from our past episode that a real high-end talent, Jordan Evangelista, fell to us at the end of the 2nd round because his contract demands were impossible. After we did all of our maneuvering with trades, taking on contracts, trading away contracts, getting all of our other drafted players signed, we sat down with Mr. Evangelista. He was looking for $9.5. He said he needed an offer well in excess of $9.5 million to sign with us. Every penny we had available was $10,529,420 or $240 if I didn't mess things up there. So I don't know if a little over $1 million more than what he was looking for is going to be considered well above. I tend to think it may not be, but it was every penny that we could possibly offer him. And clearly, if we are able to bring on someone who I think is a first-round talent with a second-round draft choice, just spending money on them, that's a good move as far as I'm concerned as we try to keep these Rockies competitive, not just for this season, but hopefully long into the fantasy future. And other than our pitchers, the team is relatively healthy right now. I already mentioned that Loera, who was named an all-star before he got hurt and suffered that UCL when he was on a rehab assignment in AAA from his first injury of the season, almost certainly done with us. As I mentioned, his got a team option for $36 million next year. He won a Cy Young Award with us last year when we won the World Series. He was an all-star this year, as I mentioned, and seemed well on his way to picking up his 300th career victory with us in the majors, but was not to be the case. So I have a hard time believing we'll bring him back, given what his profile looks like, and coming off of a serious injury where he's probably not going to be ready until the All-Star break. Hard to imagine we're going to bring him back at 41 years old. But that is a sunk cost at this point. Chase Crawford is a guy who we hope we will have back. This is his second stint on the IL this year, also out for another 4 weeks or so with a strained forearm. The injury to him is a big part of the reason that we did end up also bringing on Sal Lofton. So the second Crawford injury helped lead directly to bringing on Sal Lofton, and the second Loera injury led directly to us looking to bring on Gus Duran during July. And with that, we will get the action for the last couple months of the season underway. As I mentioned, we're on pace for a potentially historic season, up 24.5 games in the NL West. Our magic number is down to just 26, even though it's only August 1st. So we could conceivably have the division wrapped up during the month of August. And we're also in a pretty good spot for the best record in baseball. Looks like we are up by about 8 games on the White Sox for the best record in baseball at this point, and certainly have an even larger margin in the National League, where the 65 and 47 Nationals are chasing us. Looks like we're up 14.5 on them. So feeling pretty good. Actually, it looks like we're up 15 on them, if I could do some simple math quickly in my head. So it looks like we're in a really good position to be able to have home field advantage as we attempt to defend our championship. So those are certainly the goals over the last 2 months of the season. Clinch home field advantage after we've clinched the NL West, and keep this team healthy with no significant injuries as we head towards the playoffs. And obviously, if Elijah Moore or Adam Fields could be productive enough to help keep Manny Fernandez from winning the Triple Crown for the Cardinals, that would be a good thing as well. And with Ruiz back from that suspension, it's really an embarrassment of riches as we're trying to work on the lineup here. Largely going with what our manager suggested, but we did tweak a couple of things. Notably, going to follow some advice that was posted in our last episode by 3/4 Badger that maybe Demetrius Washington would make sense as our starting second baseman. And you can see he does. Defensively, I think he's a little bit of an upgrade over Danny Ruiz. So Danny Ruiz is going to play third base for us against righties, and then DH for us against lefties. Israel Mays is shortstop against both of those positions. Alex Ortega, the young third baseman, is only going to be in the starting lineup against lefties at this point, take advantage of his right-handed bat. He's got good power against everybody, as you can see, but he's definitely more effective against left-handed pitching, and with the lineup that we have right now, he finds himself an odd man out. And a little bit surprisingly, Adam Fields, the young designated hitter who's a left-handed hitter, also now out of the lineup against left-handed pitching. He is certainly much more effective, or more effective, to be fair, against righties than he is against lefties. Still a pretty impressive hitter against left-handed pitching, so I think that he'll still get some playing time against lefties because Danny Ruiz is our backup center fielder if Eddie Farley is banged up. And certainly if Elijah Moore needs a day off, or even if anyone kind of needs a day off, the roster will shift around, and Fields still should be getting some at-bats. So a little surprising to take somebody who's hitting .333 with 35 homers and 101 runs batted in out of your starting lineup, even if it's against the handedness that they're less effective against. But probably just means that his batting average and his slugging percentage and his OPS could get even better, since he's going to be allowed to feast primarily on right-handed pitching, at least for the near term until we have some potential injuries or more likely days off needed, as I mentioned, for others. And we got some more good news, throwing every penny we possibly could at Jordan Evangelista. Convinced him to sign with us. So I think the draft ended up working out really well for us. We picked up Evangelista in the second round. He was a guy that we were thinking about picking in the first round, but just didn't think we were going to have quite the money to ensure that we signed him. But obviously, with the moves that we've made, it took every penny that we had available to us, as I mentioned. But now we've gotten all of our draftees signed, including, as I said, a first-round talent who happened to fall to us in the second round because of his very high contract demands, which we were fortunately able to meet. And the first 2.5 weeks of August have gone really well. You can see we've lost only 3 games, although we have lost 2 of our last 4. So the winning percentage is up to .720. So we are definitely still potentially on pace to have a really historic regular season with this team. The race for the National League West title is hopefully nearing an end, with the magic number down to 9. Certainly a chance that we could clinch it before the end of the month of August. Actually would hope that we would clinch it before the end of the month of August at this point. And the injury situation is really unchanged. We've had a couple guys banged up over the last couple of weeks where they needed a day or 2 off, but nothing too serious. Chase Crawford looks like he's potentially a week away from a rehab assignment, and the goal after that is to just keep the rest of this team healthy, so we are at full strength when we do get to the playoffs. And when you're trying to chase a record season, one bad week can really mess it up. A 2-4 record for the Rockies over the past week, which is not a tragedy by any circumstance, although we did lose 2 series in a row. Can't remember the last time that happened, but you can see that drops the winning percentage to just barely over .700, which likely takes us out of the mix for the most wins in Major League history in a season. And as we get ready for the potential postseason, just going to make one adjustment. You can see I only have 34 guys on my 40-man roster, and quite honestly, this is a residue of when we started playing OOTP 23, and we were playing with Kansas City and Pittsburgh, 2 teams that at times had very different salary and budgetary constraints than we have here in Colorado right now. And oftentimes, if it was a major league minimum type player who was just never going to be anything more than a 4A player for us, we would trade him away or waive and DFA him to get that salary off the roster, and have just kind of, because every penny at times mattered so much with those teams. So I've kind of continued that tradition a little bit here, but as we start getting ready for the playoffs, one thing that I am going to do is, although he's not in the majors yet, we are going to put Elijah Smith onto the 40-man roster. I don't think we're going to need that arm for the playoffs, but if we do have some injuries at some point, or he does come up in a few weeks and just look incredible, which is possible, although you can see that his performance in AAA has slipped back a little bit now, although he does have a 5-3 record. His ERA has climbed to 4.09. BABIP is 363, so hopefully it's largely just bad luck, as his SIERA of 3.67 is still pretty solid. Would love to give him an opportunity to come up to the team in September. Of course, if you've been following closely, you know that we have Javon Williams, who has a sub-1 ERA in the majors this year, down in AAA right now because of the trades that we've made to our pitching staff. And we also have Chase Crawford coming back. So at most, we've got 2 spots that are going to open up on the roster, and I probably wouldn't give them both to pitchers. So there's definitely going to be a odd man or two out among those good pitchers, even when we do get to September in about a week. And speaking of Chase Crawford, he is eligible to come off of the IL now, so we are going to actually send him on a rehab assignment. He's been out for about 5 weeks. Just give him the little bit of time in AAA to hopefully ease back into pitching regularly at a very high level, and also give us the opportunity that we don't necessarily need to send somebody down to AAA right now. It's hard to imagine that Crawford isn't going to be brought back up to the Major League roster on September 1st, which could sadly leave both Javon Williams and Elijah Smith as odd men out for the month of September unless we have injuries, and certainly not hoping that we have injuries. But we'll see what happens over the next week, and then we'll make those decisions on September 1st. And we have made it to September 1st. The Rockies have accomplished our goal of clinching the NL West, up 26.5 games on the Padres and 27 on the Dodgers as the calendar turns to September. 99-42 record, so probably not on pace for that real truly historic season, but still would think we could get up over 110 wins with the team, which would still be borderline historic, certainly. We're up 14.5 on the Nationals for the best record in the NL. And the White Sox continue to play really good ball, but we are up 7.5 on them for the best record in baseball. So with just 21 games to go, would think that we are in a very good situation to retain the best record in baseball. Manny Fernandez starting to separate a bit, although the batting title, he's only up 7 points, but he is up 10 RBIs. Him and Elijah Moore both look like they could be cruising for 70 homer seasons about 2 months ago. The pace for both of them has slowed down, but certainly they're both candidates to hit 60 homers this year. And Elijah Moore, who led the league in homers and ribbies last year when he just barely missed out on a Triple Crown, certainly seems to be the most likely candidate to keep Mr. Fernandez from winning a Triple Crown this year. Moore and Fields remain second and third in the league in OPS. Elijah Moore is third in batter WAR. Taking a look at our pitching staff, Jose Ortega and Dave Alvarado, not surprisingly for a team with a 99-42 record, first and second in the league in wins. Tawesi Adebamge, who has pitched better after a slow start but still not been great, is second in the league, or tied for second in the league with 34 saves. And Dave Alvarado is tied for the league lead with Luis Rangel, just ahead of one of our former pitchers with Pittsburgh, Sean Street, for the lead in batter WAR. And look at an earned run average. You can see that the Marlins are a potential wild card team, and our former team in Pittsburgh is certainly a potential NL Central winner. And we could be going up against Rangel or two of our former top-notch pitchers, Sean Street and Devin Smith, who are first and third in the league in ERA at this point in a potential playoff matchup, which would be interesting, although it does look like Devin Smith may be banged up now, which is probably not the best thing for Pittsburgh's NL Central hopes, given that they're in a 3-team race with the Brewers and the Cardinals, and all of those teams are very borderline as far as ultimately getting a wild card spot. Taking a look at the team statistics, we went 18-9 in August, so we won 2/3 of our games, but still with the torrid pace that we were playing, that means that our winning percentage actually fell after 3 consecutive months when we had a winning percentage of over 700. Still first in the National League in runs scored, not surprisingly, first in almost all batting categories, playing half of our games in cores. And we're third in runs allowed at this point. So for a team that plays half its games in cores, I don't think you can really do much better than that. our starters with the big investments we've made there, including the recent trade for Giron, third in the league in starter ERA. Our bullpen, which has traditionally been better, has not been as good this year. But we can still rank in the top half of the league and really in the top third or so in most pitching categories. So it's been a very well-balanced season for these Rockies. An insane 59-15 record, almost an 800 winning percentage at home, winning almost 60% of our games on the road. So, as I mentioned, we've already clinched the National League West. We are closing in on clinching the best record in the National League and ultimately, hopefully, the best record in baseball. So the big goal is to really just remain healthy over these last 3.5 weeks of the season. And as we think about September roster expansion, Crawford pitched one game down in AAA for us. We're going to bring him back up on to the Major League roster. He is going to be a reliever for us, though. So we want to make that clear. And there's a chance, I think, that we may want to put him right into a closer role. Although Adebamge has been better recently, he still has the 5.49 ERA. Now that is impacted by a couple of insanely horrible starts at the beginning of the season when he was in our starting rotation very briefly. But I do not have tons of confidence necessarily in a guy with a 5.49 ERA as our closer. So we'll see what Hartman wants to do, and he wants to keep going with Adebamge. You can see Crawford's in a setup role along with Sal Lofton now. I think that's okay for the near term, but I mean, Crawford hasn't been great at the major league level this year either, but it is kind of an odd situation that I don't have a ton of confidence in my closer right now, which is not the situation you want to be in if you are a team that is in hot pursuit of a world championship. But when we look at Adebamge on paper, he looks fine. Do have to keep in mind, though, that he just came over from South Africa this year at a 36-year-old. I mean, his Sierra is really good, and his BABIP is really bad. So you can make an argument that he's been somewhat unlucky. It's something we're going to monitor, though. We may end up giving a Crawford or a Juan Vargas. Those I would think would be the two most likely people that we might move into a closer role. Give them both an opportunity over the final week or two of the season to close for us. I don't like having that kind of uncertainty and wishy-washiness on my part at this point in the season around that role, but that's the position we find ourselves in. And with bringing Mr. Crawford back to the Major League roster, that unfortunately does mean that Elijah Smith is not going to make his Major League debut this year. And Javon Williams, despite having a 0.71 ERA in the majors and a 1.20 ERA in AAA, is not going to come back to the Major League team because Hector Rivera, the Rule 5 acquisition, has now had most of the year spent in Albuquerque. You can see he's not fully developed, but I do feel for a player coming off of the bench the last month of the season, that excellent center field glove, that potential speed as a pinch runner, and he did hit 278 in about a month while he was up with us. Just feel that having him at the major league level gives us a little bit more optionality, and we are, in a way, a little bit short of outfielders right now after we made the trades to bring on both Israel Mays, who's banged up with calf soreness now, and Demetrius Washington. That did necessitate that we moved on from Mata and Milhinhos, who were backup outfielders for us. So right now, Angel Gomez is really the only backup outfielder we have. And I think that bringing Hector Rivera onto the roster is going to give us a little more versatility over these last 3 weeks of the season. And with the fact that our new shortstop, Israel Mays, was going to be banged up for a week, we just put him on the IL. That'll allow Casares to get a little more play at shortstop as we get ready for the playoffs. It'll also give a few more at-bats to Adam Fields going forward. And importantly, it will also allow us for at least the next week and a half to bring up Elijah Smith and see what he can do for us at the major league level. He's 5-3 with a 3.68 ERA in AAA. Started the year in AA where he was just as good. The Sierra is fine. He doesn't have too much left to prove. He's unhappy being down in the minors, so we are going to at least throw the top prospect in our system and the number 15 prospect in baseball a little bit of a bone by letting him join the pitching staff for at least the next week and a half or so, like I said. Now we are going to put Elijah into a reliever role in the majors. We're not going to put him right into the starting lineup just because we like our starting rotation so much. Would be interesting to see if, with his profile, whether our manager puts him right into that closer role. That could be an interesting option. I don't think Hartman will do that, but nope, looks like Elijah Smith is just going to be a long reliever. So an old school type of introduction to the majors for the hot young starting pitching prospect. Let's see how you do in long relief, and then maybe we'll give you some more responsibilities down the line. And I'm feeling a little better about that conservative decision to put Mays onto the IL because he's suffered a setback even being on the IL from that sore calf muscle, and going to probably be another 4 days or so additionally till he's back. So feel good given what we're trying to do here that we've been very conservative with how we handled that minor nick to Mr. Mays. And another week in the books now. You can see our winning percentage is now below 700. As we've gone 3-2 to start the month of September, but 600 winning percentage is not enough to maintain a 700 winning percentage. It is simple math when you think about it. Ton of games in the division to finish off the season. It's all Padres, Giants, and Dodgers for us. With the division wrapped up, not as exciting as it could have been in some circumstances. You can see we are 15 up on the Nationals for the best record in the National League. So with 16 games to go, I guess there is still a tiny chance they could catch us, but hopefully we will clinch home field in the National League very shortly. And we're also up 7.5 on the White Sox for the best record in baseball. So although our torrid pace has fallen off a bit, we are still, well positioned to achieve the goals we wanted to in this regular season. And you can see Elijah Moore has now edged ahead of Manny Fernandez in the home run race. Actually, Fields is closing in a little bit on him in RBIs. And Fields is 11 points behind in the batting race right now. Tend to think it's going to be hard to make up that gap on Fernandez, but there are still, as I said, 16 games to go, so plenty of time for us to ensure that if we couldn't get a Triple Crown winner last year, that there's no Triple Crown winner in the National League this year from another team. And I had mentioned that I wanted to see how Arabamge did as closer. Unfortunately, he hasn't had an opportunity to pitch over the past week. So don't know too much more about him. Check in on Elijah Smith, though, and he's pitched 2 2/3 innings over 3 games, struck out 4, hasn't allowed any earned runs. So a nice start to the major league career of one of the top prospects in baseball. And we've got some decisions to make now with Israel Mays coming off of the IL. We've had an extra pitcher since we brought up Elijah Smith. And what I'm actually going to do is kind of a odd move to happen on September 11th, but our Rule 5 pick, DJ Cortez, who we had picked up from the Mets, is a 35-year-old player. I like his durability, but he's kind of a replacement level guy. And you can see he's gone 3-1 with a save for us this year, 5.43 ERA, allowed 68 hits and 25 walks and 58 innings pitched, so his whip is pretty high. He's just not really part of our long-term future, I don't think. So we are actually going to, rather than sending Elijah Smith back down to the minors, at this point in the season, hopefully we're not going to have any significant injuries. We are going to go ahead and release DJ Cortez back to the Mets to open up a spot for Israel Mays on the roster. Because I do feel that we've got, at this point, still 13 major league pitchers on the roster that we're happy with. And we still also have Javon Williams in AAA. Not that I'm expecting a ton of injuries over these last 2 weeks of the season, and hopefully there will be no injuries, but just feel that at this point the need for a replacement level back end of the bullpen type of pitcher is not critical. And although Adebamge did get a save his last time out, you can see that his ERA actually went higher. Take a look at his game log, and you can see he got the save. Actually, his ERA went higher because the day before that he gave up 2 runs in a blown save situation. But those were his first 2 games of the month of September. 2 innings pitched, 2 hits, 2 earned runs, 4 walks. I am going to go to the rookie, and we are going to see what Elijah Smith can do as our closer. I may have to set the other setting to force him there. Let me just... Yeah, we are going to force Elijah Smith into our closer role here, regardless of what our manager thinks. And we are going to see what the youngster can do over the next couple of weeks. Pitching as our closer, obviously a lot of pressure, and we are actually going to move Adebamge out of the secondary role as a closer and have Chase Crawford as our secondary closer. I just don't have confidence in Adebamge at this point. I don't want him pitching in the most high leverage situations for us. He's a fragile veteran who's in his first year in the major leagues, and although that ERA is inflated by that brutal start to the year, and for those of you who weren't around a few episodes ago, I can just run back to that to show you how brutal the start of his career was. Which were the major league games? Looks like, yeah, here, starting on April. He pitched 2 games for us as a starter, and you can see he went to 1/3 of an inning over those 2 games, allowing 7 hits. Actually, sorry, that first game was as a closer. I can't remember the exact circumstance, but you can see here that he had a 2.70 ERA, having allowed 7 hits and a bunch of runs and a bunch of walks in his first 2 starts. And he still had an ERA that was in double digits when we got to the month of May. And it's been steadily going down since then, but hasn't been great. So, yeah, I think I had used him. Okay, and now I am remembering. I used him as a starter in spring training, and you can see he wasn't going tons of innings in spring training, but then I did move him to the closer role when we got to the regular season, and we needed to bring it down to our 5 starters at the time. So he did not start for us at the major league level. Now everything is coming back together. But he was a starter for us in spring training, and you can see he blew a save, got lit up, blew another save, bad again before he got his 4th save. And it was just a tough start to his career, and I just don't have confidence in him. We conceivably could end up putting Crawford in that role by the time we get to the playoffs. And as I said, I know having this type of wishy-washiness and uncertainty about that role is not a good spot to be in at this point of the season. But we are going to, over these next 2 months, see what 2 weeks, see what Elijah Smith can do, given that he's been pretty effective in the 3 games he's pitched out of the bullpen for us so far. Oh, and now things are starting to get squirrely on us. Jose Vasquez, our number 2 starter, sore elbow, moderate impact on throwing, out for a week. So we are certainly going to bench him for that week. But that will put us in a situation where we are short a starter. Let's see what Elijah Smith has done. He picked up a save for us, still hasn't allowed any runs, so we probably won't put him into the rotation. I think we will move to a 6-man rotation, though, and we're going to swap Juan Vargas into that last spot. So that should give us enough cover to ensure that we're not stressing people out too much with with Vasquez being benched for the next 7 games to undergo that injury. And also hopefully avoid any further abuse on our starting pitchers as we try to ensure that all 5 of the top 5 guys are healthy, and we'll have some decisions to make as far as the 4-man rotation for the postseason. So we've got a little over a week to go in the season. Just lost a 3-game series at home to the Giants, so that was not the most impressive performance that we've had this year. Taking a look at the standings, though, we stand at 106 and 47, so we are still 6 games up on the White Sox for the best record in baseball. Obviously have clinched the best record in the National League at this point, and we're very close with a little over a week to go to clinching the best record in baseball. Would certainly love to get up over 110 wins, and certainly have a chance to do it. Looking at the race for the Triple Crown, Manny Fernandez up 15 points now on Danny Ruiz for the batting title. So we've got a lot of guys who have been in and out contending there, but you would think that Fernandez is going to lead the league in a batting average at this point. He's got a 5 RBI lead on Fields at this point, and he's 1 home run behind Elijah Moore as those two both chase 60. So he's definitely still in the mix. If he hits a couple homers in a game and puts himself ahead of Elijah Moore, he's right back in Triple Crown position. So will be interesting to see what happens there over the last week and a half of the season. So just 3 games left at this point. We bounced back from that sweep against the Giants by sweeping San Diego and then taking 2 of the first 3 here in our strange 6-game series on the road at the Dodgers. 111 and 48 wins, so we do have an opportunity to join that select club. I believe after Los Angeles last year in the 2022 season, there are 5 teams who have won over 110 games in a major league season. So now 6 teams that have won over 110 games in a major league season. The Rockies among them. Only the 98 Yankees among those 5 going on 6 teams that won over 110 games went on to win the World Series. So the hope is that the Rockies can this season put that little bit of shockingly disappointing playoff performance for some of the top teams in baseball history during the regular season to rest this offseason or this postseason. 3 games left, though, as I mentioned. and the goal is just to remain healthy. Fan interest is dropping steadily, I guess because we're not winning games at a 700 clip anymore. The fans are not as interested. You can see they're still generally coming out to the park and selling out most games, even with the higher ticket prices that we do have. But on the brink of a potentially historic season, you would think that fan interest would not be decaying at the rate that it has been. Check in on Elijah Smith, and it's going to be hard to take him out of that role. I was thinking we might end up putting Chase Crawford into the closer role for the playoffs, but right now Elijah Smith's pitched 7 games at the major league level, 3 saves since he's been put into the bullpen, allowed 4 hits and no walks while striking out 11 over 6 innings. 190 batting average against, and he does have a 400 BABIP. So on those rare occasions when people are making contact with him, the ball is finding its way to become a hit. But he just is striking out so many people that's not happened very often. You can see he's got a negative SIERA at this point, a 9.99 ERA plus, obviously with the perfect ERA. So I don't think we go back to Adebamge, although you can see he has lowered his ERA since he's been moved to a setup role. Chase Crawford is certainly a possibility, simply because I do think that Chase Crawford's profile works better in cores, where we'll be pitching half of our games, than Elijah Smith's. But until the guy has actually given up a run, it's hard to envision moving him out of that closer role for us. And as expected, in our final game of the season, injury issues materialize. Sal Lofton, the reliever who we brought on in that trade with Boston, is diagnosis pending at this point. He has not been incredibly effective with us with a 5.48 ERA, so he could be a borderline postseason roster guy anyways, but certainly would prefer to have more options than not. Perhaps more significantly, our starting right fielder, Bobby Perez, forearm stiffness, going to be out for a week. Fortunately, we are going to have the first round bye, so that should hopefully give him time to be mostly healed by the time we get ready for our first round series. But the way it always seems to go sometimes, and literally the regular season is over, so all of this happened in our final game of the year. Sometimes the injuries just come and strike you at the most inopportune moments in these games. We did end up taking 2 out of 3 in that final series against the Dodgers to get to 113 wins. So now we will see if in the postseason these Rockies can join the New York Yankees as the only major league teams that have ever won over 110 games and also won the World Series in the same season. And taking a quick look at the team statistics, 2/3 of our games were won again in September. You know, it's sad that that's a downgrade, or actually it's good that that's a downgrade from the torrid pace we had in May, June, and July. But still, we're winning 2/3 of our games over the last 2 months of the season. Obviously ended up first in the National League in runs scored with over 1,000 runs, which is quite an achievement for a major league season. Ended up third in the National League in runs allowed. Our starters ERA, the best in the National League. So I think that says it all about what we've done to try to build this team, even with the loss of Rogelio Loera. We ended up bringing Duran on board, and you can see he was 7-2 with a 3.49 ERA for us. The starters overall, and we've got Vargas in there now simply because we had went to the 6-man rotation to try to keep people healthy when people were banged up. And we will have our choices of Alvarado, Vasquez, Ortega, Duran, and Javi Toledo to put our rotation together as a 4-man rotation for the playoffs. My thought is that Toledo, who was 13-7 with a 4.20 ERA, is probably the odd man out when all is said and done, but we will give that some more thought between now and the beginning of our next episode, taking a look at the standings. As you know, 113-49, historic season, 10 games better than the White Sox for the best record in baseball, won the NL West by 29 games. Manny Fernandez ends up being denied his Triple Crown. Elijah Moore with 61 home runs ties, of course, Roger Maris. And you could argue he has the clean National League record at this time with those 61 home runs, one more than Fernandez. And Fernandez ended up easily outdistancing Fields and Moore as far as runs batted in. Moore and Fields 2-3 in OPS for the year, behind only Mr. Fernandez. Dave Alvarado with the 2.95 ERA ends up second in the NL. Ortega first in wins, Alvarado second in wins with 19 and 18 respectively, and Alvarado second in the National League in pitcher WAR. So would think that he would be a strong contender along with Sean Street of the Pirates for National League Cy Young Award this season. And you would have to think that there's a good chance that Elijah Moore and Adam Fields will both get some significant MVP votes, but would have to think that that's ultimately going to go to Manny Fernandez based on the monster season that he put together for the Cardinals. But we are not really worried about postseason awards at this point. We are worried about the postseason itself and seeing whether the Colorado Rockies can repeat as World Series champions. And we will find out how we do in that quest in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.